This week at Spray River Homestead, we're going to teach you how to put together the frame and cattle panels to your new cattle panel greenhouse.
So the first step was determining what size we're going to want for our cattle panel greenhouse. We went with an 8 by 16 foot. So after we determined the size that we were going to want, we needed to make sure that we had a good spot for it. Now where we're putting this greenhouse has actually got a little bit of a slope to it. So a couple days ago, I took the tractor, tried to clear it off and flatten it out a little bit. It was still pretty wet and pretty muddy, so it didn't exactly spread as nicely as I wanted to. But we did level it off a little bit and have had to hand dig in the rest of the frame. So once we've gotten our spot leveled, we roughly came up with a game plan, which we'll kind of go through as we do this. Went to the lumber store, got our lumber, and before I could start laying any of this in, we had to go measure our cattle panels. Now we're using 4-foot cattle panels. They're almost exactly 4 feet. So to go 16 feet, we're going to use 4 panels. When you pull tape on them and actually measure them, they are 48 and just about a 1/4 of an inch. So to use a 16-foot board, we're actually going to be about an inch short. So what we've decided to do instead is we took our 16-foot board, we've cut down a few inches, and then we've put our 8-foot boards to the outside. So what we actually have from tip to tip on the corner is going to be 16 foot 1 inch. This is going to give us that little bit of room because, you know, nothing ever fits as snug as you want. So once we get our cattle panels in here and get them snugged in, we should be just about right to the end. Okay, so once we built our exterior frame, again, this is 8 feet by 16.1, basically corner to corner. Once we did that, we went ahead and laid out the inside garden beds. Now you can probably see that these are pressure treated on the bottom. The reason for this is we'll use non-pressure treated as we go up, but with the base, this is where you don't want to have to be replacing pieces. If you've used raised beds before, you know that eventually the non-pressure treated wood will rot out, and that's going to be fine if it's up on the next 2 layers. But for our base, we're going to want pressure treated so that we don't have to try and dig this thing up if we ever need to replace a piece. So what we did, because we're going to be using a 36-inch wide patio door, screen door, basically, on the far end, we've come 36 inches to accommodate the door. We've also given ourselves another 1.5 inches to put upright boards to frame our doorway. And then we've gone and run 2 more 16-foot boards down each side to make our beds. So our beds are roughly going to be 24 inches. That's a good reach length for just about anybody. And because we're going to put a window down here at this end to allow for a breeze all the way through, we did go ahead and make this a U shape. So this is another 24-inch bed down here on the end by about 39 inches wide, which is what we ended up down here. So after your base is complete, you're going to go ahead and start your next layer. Now for the next layer, we're using 2 by 8s, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the sidewalls up high enough that when we've got the arch of the cattle panels over the top, we can still fit a screen door in the end. So what you do is basically what you did before. The one exception, you're going to leave a hole at this end where your door is going to go. So for us, that's 36 inches because we're using a 36-inch door. Minus 1.5 inches, or add an extra 1.5 inches for the hole, so you'll have 39 inches total, so that you'll have a 2x4 upright on either side of that hole to frame in your doorway. So other than that, basically you're doing the exact same thing on this level. Don't worry if when you put it on, it's not exactly matching up with the board underneath it, especially if you're using 16s like we are, because they'll flex and bend. What we'll do once we've got our next layer completed, we'll come back in with some 2x4s, and we're going to basically screw all this stuff together so that we don't have our sidewalls moving. So from here, we're going to go ahead and start our next level. Alright, so for this project, this layer is the last layer. So what's different from this layer to the one before, of course, we've still got our 39 inches for our door. But we went ahead and took out the 2 pieces right there that connect to the back board. I like that just because it gives me an easier time with planting. I also don't have an extra board on either side right there to soak up water to take away from the plants. So Basically this top layer is just going to be a U shape, where the other two layers of course are going to have the 16s run all the way through. So from here, the next step is going to be to tie all of our boards together. The key to this is going to be, we're going to use 24-inch, roughly 24-inch 2x4s. We're going to put one at each corner and one about every 4 feet. And the reason for this is just to kind of pull the walls together, make sure they're nice and solid, not only on the outside, but we're going to do it on the inside. This is because, especially in longboards, you'll get a lot of warpage over time. By going ahead and tying them together with a 2x4, we're going to make sure that those walls, even if they start to flex one way or another, they're at least all going to do it together. The first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to do our inside corners first. And the reason for this is because this is where we need it to be as level as possible. So this is where you're going to need your level to the inside of both of these spots. Because remember, we're putting a door frame in here. So we're going to need a level on both sides of this hole to make sure we're as upright as possible. Now, if that means that this comes out a little wonky on the outside, it's not a big deal. We're just holding in dirt, so it's not a huge critical thing. But this is where it's going to be critical. If you get spread out too far, you're going to have a lot more trouble getting that door in. Just like if you get spread too far in. So absolutely make sure you've got a level, and we're going to level that off and put our first braces in. Alright, so it turns out that these are going to be about 18 inches tall. You don't want them all the way to the top, mostly just to make it a little easier when you're spreading dirt and everything on the top. The other reason is you're going to want them at least that short on this side so we can get our cattle panels in. So just to make it easier, I cut everything the same length. So what we did is we took the level and we went ahead and leveled this way. So we are perfect. And then we went ahead and leveled this way. You don't really have to be too worried about it front to back, but at least for me personally, if I've got at least one end as level as possible, if I've got a little flex in the back, it's not such a big deal. So once you've got this corner in, you're going to want to do the other corner by your doorway so that you know that these are set. Now, once these are screwed on, they're not moving. And I do screw them from both ways. So do whatever you've got to do to adjust. Go ahead and screw them from the outside, but also from the inside. This means that this thing is not going anywhere. So once this one's set, we set that one. Then we go ahead and we do our other 4 corners, and then the back corners of our U, and then we'll go ahead and we'll do the every 4 feet, and then we'll be ready to move on. So as you can see, we've got our braces put in, both sides, on both sides of our U, and we do have one here in the middle of the back bend, even though you can't see it. Because you brace to the inside, you only really need the one in the back. Like I said, these are going to be at 4 feet. Now these do multiple things. So when you're putting them in, you want to hold them about the same distance from the top of your board. So you're going to be somewhere around 2.5, 3 inches, whatever you're wanting to do. The reason these are set at every 4 feet is we're using 48-inch cattle panels. So what happens is when we set our panels in here, they're actually going to sit from brace to brace. And so you've got 3.5 inches on a 2x4 to make that thing sit just right where you want it. And then we're going to use another board on the inside to sandwich our panels actually to the exterior bed rail. So now that all this is done, you've got a couple options. You can either go ahead and put your panels on and continue the project from here, or if you're lucky enough to have a tractor or a big cart or just a lot of time, you can go ahead and backfill your beds now. I'm going to go ahead and backfill my beds because I have a tractor and I've got a bucket and can do it. So I'm actually going to put some gravel down the middle for a walkway, and then I'm going to go ahead and put dirt and compost in both sides. Now, don't get carried away. You don't want to get your dirt all the way to the top if you choose to go ahead and do that, because you've still got to make sure that you've got enough room to get your panels in and get your panels secure. So we're going to bring in some dirt and compost, but I'm going to leave mine about halfway from the top of the top 2x8. So we're only going to be 3-4 inches deep right there. That's going to give me enough room to get my 2.5 to 3 inches of cattle panel on there and secured without having to dig in the compost and the dirt to make room for it. So I'm going to start up the tractor and go ahead and get my gravel going and get my gravel in.
Okay, so with all of the compost and gravel in, you can see we're ready for some cattle panels. So Nikki's down grabbing the last of the 4 cattle panels, but she's backfilled it with gravel in the center. So this is about somewhere around 2 inches deep that she brought in the tractor and then used a shovel to kind of put it where she wanted. Now, of course, the compost itself down in the beds, you can see is right to the top of her braces, which are about 4 feet. And then we're going to use some bolt cutters to basically snip off the corners there, pieces to get them to sit flush to the front edge. So they'll come up and over. So we're going to take out kind of like a little notch. But they'll sit over that to make the cattle panels go to the front edge of the board versus keeping them to the inside of the board. It's just going to help with helping the plastic in that. Okay, so with the panels on, you can look down here in the corner and see that these are notched. And really what we did is just use a tape measure to notch them. So in measuring the thickness of the board, cut that piece off, the height of the edge, cut that off, and just using bolt cutters, marking it with a Sharpie, snip, snip, we're done with that. So now the beauty is the cattle panels are in. They're kind of like big noodles a little bit, so until you get the bottoms fastened on, they're going to kind of rock back and forth. But that's okay. So what we're going to do is just use some old 2x4s we have laying around, and we're going to basically sandwich those. So the panels will be the cream filling, and the boards outside and the extra pieces will be the cookie, I guess you call it. So we'll sandwich those together, make sure they're secured at the bottom, and then we'll tie each of the panels together in between here. And we're still deciding if we want to use wire or baling twine. Okay, so we ended up finding some 1x3s in our scrap pile, one of our many scrap piles of wood and that. So you can use 2x4s when you're securing these together, or 1x3s, or whatever you want. We use 1x3s. They were, well, I won't say free because we had to buy them somewhere along the way, but they were plentiful. So those are secured in, and now we flipped a coin, and baling twine is going to win. So of course we get this off the hay we buy, and we cut ourselves and all that. So this stuff is great. It's like a poly blend, so it lasts and lasts and lasts. It's pretty hard to cut unless you're using something sharp. So we're going to tie up all these panels, and we'll show you the finished product. Okay, so we have everything tied together, and one thing I do want to mention to you about the cattle panels is there's going to be an inside and an outside. So the cross pieces, the shorter pieces, need to go on the inside instead of the outside. The long pieces will need to be on the outside. The reason for this is that your plastic is going to rub against this. Having the inner pieces or the shorter pieces on the outside means that you're going to have a lot of pokey spots that will eventually rub through your plastic, and it's going to basically degrade your cover. So make sure they're on the inside. That way when you have this plastic rubbing up and down or any flex, it's not going to rub through your plastic, and you won't have to worry about replacing it in the near term versus the long term. Okay, now with everything tied together, you can see that the greenhouse frame is done. So the plastic we have on order is very similar to what we use on the geodesic dome. And we also have a screen door to go in plus a window. So once the plastic comes in, we will then put in the framing for the window and the door and that, which will be next episode. So this is how you start your greenhouse, and how we'll finish it we will have coming up soon. So that's it for this week on Sprague River Homestead. Any questions on this point of how to build the bed, fill it, or put up your cattle panels and tie them together, just let us know in the comments. Otherwise, get ready. We're going to be done with this soon. We'll see you next time.